How's it going, guys? Today, I'm going to be featuring the Lion, the Tier 7 premium British battleship. Now, the Lion is what I would consider to be the best British battleship right after the Conqueror. The Conqueror is just kind of ridiculous, and I don't think there's ever going to be a British battleship that will beat that out. But looking at the rest of the tech tree and also the other premiums, I think the Lion being a tier 7 and comparing it to the rest of the battleships at their own tiers, I think the Lion is honestly the best. Now, it's not the best battleship at the tier, and it's far from it, but I do think of the British ships, it is definitely the best battleship. Now, the Lion, comparing it to the Vanguard and the Monarch is obsolete, and the Vanguard just needs so much help, it's still getting buffs, and even got a buff this past update. I know a lot of people consider the Vanguard to be very good, however, they are the ones that usually angle away and kite at the back of the map spamming HE, and in my opinion that's not really useful to a team and trying to win games. Now, moving on from that, the Temeraire, which is also a Lion and shares the same hull, and is also basically the same exact ship, is unfortunately a tier 8, and unfortunately, tier 8s have to go against legendary tier, and the Lion being at tier 7, it's basically able to compete with tier 8s, and then it also has the benefit of going against tier 6, and the ship can absolutely dominate the low tiers. Now, the Lion unfortunately suffers from the same thing that all other British battleships have, and that is short fuse AP. I'm just not a fan of short fuse, and I would prefer the standard AP shells, which is why I actually really like the Warspite, because that is the only British battleship that actually has standard AP. Now, aside from that, the Lion's firing angles are pretty bad, and usually you don't really want to use your rear turret because, as you can see, trying to use the rear turret, the firing angles are so bad, you're essentially giving broadside, and unlike most of the other British battleships, this ship has a vulnerable citadel, which if you're trying to use your rear turret, more often than not, you will be citadeled. If you can find yourself lobbing islands and potentially staying undetected and not at any sort of threat of being shot at while you use your rear turret, then by all means try to use that rear turret to get the most DPM that you can. But for the most part, if you're not able to, you should really just use your front guns and forget your rear turret exists. Now, that's pretty much all I have on the Lion. While I let this play in the background, I thought I'd take some time to go over some of the things that World of Warships PC has in their pipeline and certain features that they've added in the past and things that are coming. And I'm kind of curious to see what you guys think of them because most likely those features will find its way to Legends at some point. Now, the first topic is a very hot one. It's about subs. Now, on PC, submarines were not very well received. The fact that submarines were in development for about 4 years, and then Wargaming had gone and said that they simply had to release it how it was and move on because they spent so much time on it. And then, since they didn't want to spend any more time developing it, it was simply released, and ultimately it was not in a very good state and still is not. I think submarines and the general consensus of CVs are in a similar spot. It just doesn't really fit in a game where the main focus is ship artillery and surface ships fighting each other. Everything that I've seen done to subs so far, and ever since it's released, has been a bit questionable. A lot of the detection of subs is limited to a consumable. Even sonar will not be able to spot a sub unless it's basically point blank range, and by the time you spot it, it will just launch all of its torpedoes and dev strike you, and there's really no counterplay. Most of the time the sub is submerged, and subs also have access to homing torpedoes. You just launch them and then you can ping a ship and the torpedoes will home in on the ping. And I really just think that that's one of the worst ideas that could have been added for subs. Now, aside from that, if the devs ever tried to add it to Legends, I'm not really sure how they would even try to implement it. There is a thing such as anti-sub warfare where destroyers have a ability to drop depth charges, and then battleships and cruisers typically have planes that can drop depth charges on an area. the ASW that ships typically have are consumables, and with Legends being forced to play on controllers, well, we don't exactly have a whole lot of buttons to spare, and if I had to imagine how they would implement ASW, they would most likely have to automate it or just exclude ASW altogether. If that was done, then there could be really no possibility to counter subs if they were submerged, so to balance it would probably have to be a surface ship, and then it basically just becomes another destroyer, and ultimately is something I don't think should make its way to Legends. Now, the general response from a lot of the community managers from Wargaming has simply said that there are no plans, and as true as that may be, at some point they will run out of ideas and content to release, and will find a way to try and add that. It's pretty much inevitable, and ultimately, all we can really do is hope that Wargaming implements it well, and it's not the mess that it is on PC. Now, the next thing is another thing that was added on PC, which I think is just something that doesn't really need to exist, and that's hybrid battleships. There's no reason battleships should be able to launch squadrons and then have plane spotting on any target that they want. A skilled player will simply be able to play aggressively, spot destroyers, and be a real menace to any target on the map because ultimately it is a battleship and a carrier in one. And speaking of carriers, the recent waterline had mentioned the addition of support carriers, which it was also previously mentioned a few years ago, or maybe just a year ago. Time has kind of gotten blurry, but ultimately they mentioned that support carriers will be able to essentially do the same thing as normal carriers. However, they won't be able to deal damage nearly as well, but they do have support roles such as dropping smoke screens and sort of preventing consumable cooldowns, and a damage con may have essentially had to take 2 or 3 minutes to reload. I think one of the biggest concerns for PC is if the support carriers are considered a separate class from the normal CVs, and then you could division a CV and a support carrier, and then in the current state of World of Warships, there being a lot of subs, it would be a bunch of carriers, subs, and destroyers, basically a bunch of stuff that wouldn't get spotted, and then there would be a few surface ships that just simply get punished. Now, everything I just mentioned, I think are just horrible ideas and horribly implemented, and honestly shouldn't make its way to Legends. Now, everything I just mentioned is pretty much all of the things that I just don't think should make its way into World of Warships Legends. I think everything that I mentioned were just simply unnecessary for PC and ultimately causes a lot more problems than actual fun experiences. Now, something in the recent waterline that they mentioned that I thought was a really good idea was the implementation of a way for you to essentially enter a battle in a ship that you just died in and not have to wait for that battle to end before you go into another one. Now, as good of an idea this is, I do have some concerns where players will either simply just YOLO in and die and then simply go on to the next, or if there are some players that absolutely hate carriers and then they see one and do the same thing, just go in and die so they can try to find a match when there's no carriers. Ultimately, abuse of this system is a concern, although I do think generally it is a good idea. So when we're trying to either grind tech trees or certain missions that require either maybe torpedo hits, secondary hits, something along those lines, if we die trying to do so, we can ultimately go into the next and try to complete those missions a bit quicker. Because this is a game after all, and not everyone has a whole lot of time to get things done, so allowing players to do so will also make players a bit more happy. Now, another feature that PC recently got, I think it might have actually been a year ago, it is the new system for helping you grind through first win bonuses. So, for an example, like our recent Christmas event, we did have a bunch of first win bonuses for those winter shards in order to get the Yoshino. Now, the system on PC, how it would work is essentially if you were playing a tier 7, depending on how many ships you'd have in total in port, you could get one win in a ship, and then unlock a number of first win bonus rewards instead of having to do each of them separately, ultimately reducing the grind. And the more ships you have in port, the more rewards you can unlock at once. I think this is honestly a really good thing that could be added to World of Warships Legends to help reduce the grind, especially during the holidays when people may or may not have enough time to actually go and try to go through every ship for all of the first wins. Now, the final thing I would like to discuss, which we somewhat have a form of this in World of Warships Legends, although I think the way PC handled it is much better. But essentially, I'm talking about our epic mods, or the way that PC unique commanders like William Halsey, Glutier Lutjens, or Kuznetsov have unique skills that can activate during a match. Ultimately, I think having these skills activate through a commander is much better than having it activate through a mod. Also, because the fact that the unique commanders actually have 3 unique abilities that you can activate, and it's not just one mod that has one unique ability. Who knows, maybe they could add this in the future to World of Warships Legends. However, the way that they implemented epic mods, I don't exactly have a lot of hope that they will implement it or implement it well enough that it doesn't cause any problems or frustrations like the way these epic mods are. Even though they are a test, I think they just botched it quite a bit. To quickly recap, subs, hybrid ships, and support carriers, a big no. Being able to enter battle before the previous battle ends on a ship that was destroyed, that's a big yes. The addition of new system for helping you grind more than one first win bonus, that's also a big yes. And lastly, the addition of special skills that could be found on commanders like Halsey, Lutjens, and also Kuznetsov on PC. But let me know what you guys think about the things that I went over. If you think they are good ideas or bad ideas, if they should be added to Legends or not, or maybe if you just don't care and you just like the game anyway. But anyway, that's all I really have for you guys in this video. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this game, and if you do, leave a like and subscribe for more, and share it with your friends. And definitely leave a comment down below on the things that I mentioned previously, or another ship that you would like to see in the future. But until next time, aloha.
Torpedoes astern. Torpedoes astern. Torpedoes astern.
Enemy battleship destroyed.